If you enjoy the story, give it a like and feel free to leave a comment. Also, be sure to subscribe and click the bell icon to be the first to hear new cryptid tales. I'm always looking for stories to share, so if you've had your own encounter with the unknown, send me an email at cryptidtalesmel@gmail.com. Back in the late 1990s, I was working for the Department of Sport and Recreation as a program director at one of their sport camps deep in the Nunez Forest, located 17 kilometers northeast of Lithgow, just outside of Sydney in Australia. The camp accommodated high school students, aged 16 to 18, running activities like canoeing, bike riding, rock climbing, and archery. Then at night, we'd take them on bushwalks on the various tracks surrounding the camp, lit only by torchlight, huddling together in small groups. Sometimes, if we had a particularly bad group of kids who didn't pay attention and caused trouble for us, we'd chat to their teachers and organize a prank. One of the camp staff would dress up in a gorilla suit, and as the kids neared camp after their night walk, run out and attempt to scare them. One time we had a group from the western suburbs, and they'd been total pains in the asses, to say the least. I arranged with my colleague that it was definitely a prank night, and we set off. It was a moonless night, and I had only the torch, so the kids were already crapping themselves, so to speak, because of how pitch black it was. There were an array of animals in the forest, including wallabies, wombats, and the occasional feral pigs and cats, so the scurrying noises had them on edge from the beginning. The students themselves were very quiet as they tried to peer into the dark. Suddenly, we heard a massive cracking of a branch about 30 meters ahead. I figured my colleague was laying down the prep work for the scare. I played it up with the kids, pretending I was worried, and they all huddled closer. As we walked along, we could hear the trudging of something nearby walking in time with us. I shined the torch around jokingly while laughing to myself at how well it was going. We were some 300 meters from camp before another loud cracking sound echoed through the area. This was above and beyond what my colleague would normally do, so I was stoked. I figured he'd just really gotten into character because he'd had enough of these kids' antics as well. At this point, two of the kids shouted that they saw a giant yowie and were terrified, and half of them sprinted back into their cabins. I headed back inside, laughing, and ready to congratulate my colleague on his stellar efforts. But when I came inside and congratulated him, he replied saying, "What the hell are you on about? I've been crook all night." I thought he was taking the piss, but the other camp staff, who didn't know of the prank, confirmed that he had been sleeping off of a fever. Whatever had been following us wasn't someone from our camp. A camp situated 16 kilometers away from the next closest building, only accessible by tricky to navigate corrugated dirt tracks. The next morning, before the kids were up, a few of us went back into the forest to scope out what had actually happened. What we found still leaves me wondering what the hell was there that night. Strewn on the forest floor was a massive trunk, about 15 to 20 centimeters in diameter, that had been cracked off a tree from about 3 meters in the air. Walking further along the path, we found another one, too high for a normal human to reach, and thick enough that you'd need a saw to cut through. We reached out to the boys at the forestry department, who had similar stories about being stalked through that area of the forest. Nobody knew exactly what it was, but yowies were suggested. Nearby, there were areas of the park that were completely unreachable, deep into ravines that nobody had ever been. Anything could have been living down there, and whatever this thing was had to be bigger than any animal we had ever seen in those forests. My guess is the boys did see a yowie. Needless to say, after that night, there was no way we would go walking at night in the forest again. This story comes from my great-grandfather that's no longer with us. It takes place in 1988. He told me this story when I was around 7, a few months before he passed away. This is about a South Carolina cryptid known as the Lizard Man. My grandfather was out on a hunt in late October. This October was really warm, which is pretty normal for us. He had with him his over-under double-barreled 12-gauge and trusted bloodhound named Straight. He said around 8 in the morning he shot down one of the biggest bucks he's ever seen in his life. But sadly, this is one deer he wouldn't be taking home. He and Straight walked carefully up to his game, watching to see if he really was dead or not. No one wants to be at the receiving end of a wounded and pissed off buck. He said as he walked to the deer, he noticed it was moving, but not on its own. He said it was being dragged into the brush by something he couldn't see. Thinking it was a coyote, he fired a shot into the ground to scare it off. He said this was when things got crazy. This thing stood up out of the brush. It was about 9 feet tall and every bit of 250 pounds of green, scaly muscle. My grandfather said the thing hissed at him, picked up the deer, and ran at full speed down the ridgeline. He loaded 2 more shells in his gun and decided to go head to the truck as fast as he could. Even Straight, an old dog who had seen his share of dangerous animals while on the hunt, didn't even so much as growl at this thing. He kept hunting in those woods till the day he died. Now, my brother and I do. We haven't seen the creature my grandfather did, and I'm not too sure we want to.